We have a lot to talk about this morning. We thought we'd take a step back and take a look, big picture, starting out with a column in the Washington Post by Eugene Robinson, which asked the question, is Donald Trump okay? Gene focuses on what we heard from Trump in his Las Vegas campaign rally on Sunday, writing in part, we in the media have failed by becoming inured to Trump's verbal incontinence. Not just the rapid-fire lies and revenge-seeking threats, but also the frightening glimpses into a mind that is evidently unwell. The White House press corps would be in wolfpack mode if Biden were in the middle of a speech and suddenly veered into gibberish about boats and sharks. There would be front-page stories questioning whether the president at 81 was suffering from dementia. And the op-ed pages would be filled with thumbsuckers about whether Vice President Harris and the cabinet should invoke the 25th Amendment. House Republicans would already have scheduled hearings on Biden's mental condition and demanded that he take a cognitive test. The tendency with Trump at 77 is to say he's just being Trump, but he's like this all the time. As a reminder, just some of Trump's rally in Las Vegas on Sunday.
I went to a boat company in South Carolina. The boat, I said, how is it? He said, it's a problem, sir. They want us to make all electric boats. So I said, let me ask you a question. And he said, nobody ever asked this question. And it must be because of MIT, my relationship to MIT. Very smart. He goes, I say, what would happen if the boat sank from its weight and you're in the boat and you have this tremendously powerful battery and the battery's now underwater and there's a shark that's approximately 10 yards over there. By the way, a lot of shark attacks lately. Do you notice that? A lot of shark. I watched some guys justifying it today. Well, they weren't really that angry. They bit off the young lady's leg because of the fact that they were not hungry, but they misunderstood who she was. These people are crazy. He said there's no problem with sharks. They just didn't really understand a young woman swimming now really got decimated, and other people too, a lot of shark attacks. So I said, so there's a shark 10 yards away from the boat, 10 yards, or here. Do I get electrocuted if the boat is sinking, water goes over the battery, the boat is sinking? Do I stay on top of the boat and get electrocuted? Or do I jump over by the shark and not get electrocuted? Because I will tell you, he didn't know the answer. He said, you know, nobody's ever asked me that question. I said, I think it's a good question. I think there's a lot of electric current coming through that water. But you know what I'd do if there was a shark or you get electrocuted? I'll take electrocution every single time. I'm not getting near the shark. So we're going to end that. We're going to end it for boats.
You know, so one of the tells on just how crazy he was looking at the people that had driven hours to be there, put on their Trump hats, and through the whole time they're going like this, looking at each other in the background going, what's exactly going on here? Turning around and whispering, what's he talking about? Well, he's talking about really what he always talks about. I mean, you know, we have Trump, and he's been doing this, and this is why the Biden campaign, and John Lemire's been reporting on this, and this is why the Biden campaign has been desperate to get Donald Trump out of a courtroom where he has to be quiet and on the campaign trail where they can actually hear him. Because, you know, Trump spews an hour of bizarre non sequiturs, and he's been doing it for the past year or two about sharks, electric boats, Hannibal Lecter, and what a great guy he is, about executing the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff.
Not paying the teleprompter company.
Not paying the teleprompter company. Mosquitoes, World War II, the gathering storm of World War II that's coming. President Obama still being president of the United States, which he continues to do 8 years after President Obama went home. And I do think Jing makes a great point. If Joe Biden had given one of those speeches, it would be on the front page of the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal.
Definitely the Wall Street Journal.
The Washington Post. And everybody would be doing exactly what they were saying. But for Biden goes to D-Day, and we're going to talk about this in a little bit. The Washington Post just posted a story this morning. He does a fantastic job, and they actually use cheap fakes
Yeah.
Where they're trying to make it look, oh, he's trying to sit down and, oh, my God, they're for a chair that's not there. Everybody on the stage was, because Lloyd Austin wasn't done with his speech yet. There were about 3 or 4 different things where the Republican Party is lying. So they have to make that up, which is a lot like the Wall Street Journal story, where they knew they were lying to their readers. They knew that Kevin McCarthy, what he was telling the Wall Street Journal was a lie. They knew. And because Kevin McCarthy had said before what a great negotiator Biden had been in the very meeting where they tried to get Kevin McCarthy to say, oh, well, he was out of it. It's also a big tell that they talked to senators and Nancy Pelosi and others who said, no, let me explain to you what happened to that meeting. And they went into great detail about how Biden was pulling people together. I remember in the same meeting, it was Biden and everybody else trying to move Mike Johnson along. We reported on it at the time. The Wall Street Journal runs a front page story, a lead story that they know is a lie. So with Biden, the Republican Party has to make shit up. And I'm sorry, I can't think of a better way to say that, to try to make Biden look old and demented. Trump, he does it every day. He's out on the campaign trail. And people just laugh. Oh, well, yeah, he's crazy. Well, look at that. Can you believe he's so stupid that he's talking about this and he melts down when his teleprompter goes down? That's funny. And that's the political world we're living in 2024.
It is, and that moment, that's sort of one example in a larger point. We could talk about all the lies. He does it enough, and he does it for so long and so consistently that people sort of get numb to it. There he goes again. But we say all the time on this show, for example, when that Wall Street Journal piece came out, you could take any one rally, and this is maybe the best example of it. As you say, Joe, it was 102 degrees. Those people are standing in the heat. He said, by the way, we'll get to this quote, I don't care about you, literally talking to his supporters, his voters. I just want your vote, suggesting, yeah, it's hot out here, but I'm the one who's suffering. I don't care about you. More on that in a moment. But he goes on this story about batteries and sharks. And he makes that tie because of my tie to MIT. His uncle.
Oh, my God.
His uncle worked at MIT in the 1940s.
Oh, my God.
He just can't. He feels there's something about MIT. He knows that's prestigious. He knows it sounds like he's smart. It was his uncle 80 years ago. All that. You could.
His uncle.
You could,
my God. Like
so
what a loon.
That
what
was
a
just
loon.
was just the latest and perhaps one of the most extreme examples of something that happens. Again, we say it all the time here. You can watch or not. Maybe you don't want to watch his rallies or not. It happens every time he steps on a stage. So if you really think that Joe Biden is the one losing it, pour yourself a drink, sit back, and watch that performance in Las Vegas over the weekend, in Nevada over the weekend. That's it. That's the argument right there.
So what Sam Stein, what Republicans don't understand, and I keep trying to explain this to them, but I think I'm going to just give up. When they lie about Joe Biden's mental acuity, when they lie and they make things up, all they are doing is lowering expectations for the biggest campaign event coming, and that is the debate. And they do this time and time again. They say, oh, Joe Biden's out of it. Joe Biden's whatever. He goes to the State of the Union. He kicks him in the teeth. And then everybody's like, oh, my God, where did that come from? And then they say, oh, he's on cocaine. He had to be on cocaine because he was so good. He was jacked up. No, he was just Joe Biden. And I've said this before. I'll say it again. I've talked to the guy for hours at a time. The guy is all there. Years ago, I talked to Donald Trump hours at a time. Not all there. And so here we are. They're pushing down. He's much worse now. They're pushing down expectations for Joe Biden by lying about him. Mm-hmm. All they're doing in the end is helping him, because the whole country's going to be looking at those debates. And Biden, once again, is going to exceed expectations because of their false narrative.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this happened in 2020, too. People probably might forget it, but there was this big narrative going around that he had an earpiece that was feeding him the the questions and the answers, and he had to. It actually took off so much on right-wing media that he and his campaign had to put out a tweet joking about it with the earpiece and a pint of ice cream as his debate prep routine. I will say it does diminish the expectations. It helps him ultimately clear a very low hurdle. So from a strategic standpoint, it does benefit Biden. Also, Trump's giving away one of the debate questions that will come up, which is how would you rather die? Electrocution via an electrical boat or a vicious shark attack? And so now Joe Biden has one of those questions, too. So in two ways, they've benefited Biden. And then let me just say on the larger scale, like, look, I think two things can be objectively true here, right? One is Joe Biden is, old. I think that's objectively true. He's different than he was 4 years ago, 8 years ago. We all are, right? That's just how it goes. The other thing that is objectively true is what you said, which is if Joe Biden had gone on stage and talked about, a shark attack or being electrocuted in a boat, I think it would have been the dominant media story for a week. It would have spawned a whole round of Democratic agitation and freakout. It would have spawned a whole slew of editorials wondering if he should drop out. I think there are different standards here, and I think part of it is exactly what Willie says, which is we've become sort of calloused and numb to the Trump routine, and so that shades how we view Trump.
And that is, if you look into the history of authoritarianism, is a component of that, desensitizing a population becoming inured. And Jonathan, this comes as we learn more about the Israelis' military, their daring rescue of 4 hostages over the weekend. Newly released helmet camera footage shows forces rescuing Almog Mayor John, Andrei Kozlov, and Shlomi Ziv. The video has been edited by Israeli authorities. The Israeli military says the men were being held captive in the home of a Hamas member. You can hear heavy fire as the operatives enter the apartment. In an effort to give the rescuers ample cover, the military says the Air Force started striking dozens of nearby targets. That led to scores of civilians, including children, to be killed.
Hamas health officials say that at least 270 people died in the raid. Israeli sources say less than 100.
Right. Israeli forces also rescued a 4th hostage, 26-year-old Noah Argamani. She was being held in a different building just 200 yards away.
So, Willie, there's so many cross currents going on right now in this war between Israel and terrorists, Hamas terrorists. You have, of course, the hostage release, extraordinary hostage release. You have Benny Gantz resigning from the cabinet. You have the United Nations backing the U.S. peace proposal. Just again, it's a lot going on in Israel's northern border. I mean, there's so much going on, so many cross currents. You wonder if this point, this sort of the climax of it, where maybe we move to that U.S. authored ceasefire.
Yeah, there are some sticking points, obviously, for the Israelis in there, and Hamas obviously cannot be trusted as a terrorist organization in the negotiation. But we will see. It is, it got the votes in the unanimously, except for Russia abstained in the UN Security Council at the UN. So we'll see. But it's that hostage rescue. When you look at the video there, the fact that those 4 hostages were alive, that the special services of the IDF were able to pull that off. Extraordinary. Obviously, the civilian death that came with it makes things worse, makes things more complicated. But Hamas also could have avoided this by not taking hostages and not hiding behind them inside of Gaza. Let's bring in the columnist and associate editor for the Washington Post, David Ignatius. David, so let's get to Joe's point about everything that's going on right now in this critical moment and your assessment of that peace plan from the White House, the peace plan from the UN. How viable is it? Is there enough in there that there somehow, some way, these two sides could come to the table?
So, Willie, the first thing to say is the White House is really putting on a full court press on this. It took this peace plan first to the G7. Other major industrial nations got support for it. Now they've taken it to the UN Security Council, gotten it passed with Russia abstaining. They now have the world's leading powers behind this proposal, and they now want to, in effect, impose it on both Hamas, which has been resistant, and Israel, which sometimes is a little bit hard to read about exactly what it agrees to and what it doesn't. Right now, the main focus is on Hamas. The Secretary Blinken in Israel made that point very strongly. It's up to Hamas to come to the table and do this deal. You ask, what is the difference about? And really, I think it's about language in the three-part agreement that, in the minds of Israel and Hamas, determines who can say they won the conflict. Hamas is demanding a written statement from Israel that there be a permanent end to hostilities. Israel says we don't want to sign a permanent statement. Instead, we want negotiations about the transition to the permanent ceasefire, where we get to work out all the details of how the future of Gaza will go. Israel does not want to see, will not accept future Hamas governance of Gaza. That's been made clear from the beginning of the war. So I think what we're going to see is it continued intense pressure. The problem is, what is the U.S. plan B if this pressure doesn't budge Hamas? There's no sign that I see that they're really ready to give up that demand for the permanent ceasefire. And there's not an obvious answer right now for the administration except keep banging, keep pushing, keep pointing to all the international insistence that this happen.
Right, and you look at the end, the third phase of the peace process, and it is the movement to a non-Hamas governed Palestinian Authority running Gaza. Obviously, a big win for Israel if, in fact, that is where we end up. David, it's interesting. We saw pictures of the Secretary of State, America's Secretary of State, shaking hands with Benny Gantz and then Benjamin Netanyahu. Interesting, again, shaking hands with Benny Gantz right after he resigned from Netanyahu's cabinet, a man who many consider to be a possible successor to Netanyahu. We've seen support. We've seen signs that Israelis still are backing President Biden and still see President Biden as a friend. I'm curious, what's the power of Secretary of State Blinken shaking hands with Benny Gantz a day or so after he resigns from the cabinet? And what kind of impact do you think that has domestically inside of Israel?
Well, Joe, the first thing to say is that the polls still suggest that Gantz is significantly more popular than Netanyahu. To have the American Secretary of State, symbol of Israel's most important alliance, there shaking hands with somebody who could be prime minister gives that person a kind of validation. We're going to enter a very strange period now. The war cabinet that's been steering the war for 8 months has been effectively dissolved. The remaining people who matter are Netanyahu himself and the Minister of Defense, Yoav Gallant, who's from Netanyahu's party but has ambitions of his own. Is Gantz going to try to conduct a strident campaign against Netanyahu even while the war is going on? That would be difficult. That might cost him some of his support. I'd mention one other thing that I hear from every Israeli I talk to now, and that is, don't forget about Lebanon. The situation on our northern border is getting worse by the day. The number and intensity of Hezbollah rocket fire on those northern towns is insupportable. Israelis say they have to get their families who fled the north after October 7 in fear of an attack back there by the start of school in September. I think if that doesn't happen, we could see major conflict in the north later during the summer.
Let's go straight to our top story this hour. Pennsylvania's Democratic Governor Josh Shapiro is pushing back against Donald Trump's constant claim that America is, quote, a failing nation. In an interview on MSNBC last night, Shapiro, who is a Biden campaign surrogate, had this blunt response to the former president's attacks.
I got a message to Donald Trump and all his negativity and his whining. Stop talking America. This is the greatest country on earth, and it's time that we all start acting like it. The good people of Pennsylvania understand that this is a great country, understand that we got a whole lot going for us. And now it's time for us to continue this path of progress that Joe Biden has laid out and not go back to a negative time, not listen to the whining of the former president.
I mean, it's something Claire McCaskill I talk about all the time. And I think Democrats have such a great opening here because Donald Trump and his acolytes are always trashing the U.S. military. They're always trashing the U.S. economy. They're always trashing our country, the institutions of our country. Our economy is stronger than it has been in a very long time relative to the rest of the world, probably in over a generation. We are the envy of the world. Every other country would do anything to have our economy right now. I mean, $26 trillion every year in GDP compared to, China's 18 or 19 trillion, Russia's 1.4, 1.5 trillion. You look at the fact that the dollar is stronger now than any time since the mid-1980s. In fact, the problem is the dollar is so strong, people fear that it may be hurting trade because we are so powerful as an economy. The Dow hitting 40,000. You could go down the list. Same thing with the military. Donald Trump is always trashing the military. You have people like Tuberville, Republican senators constantly saying that our military is weak and woke. Biggest lie, yet another lie. They're trashing our economy is stronger relative to the rest of the world by all measurements than at any time since the end of World War II when Europe was in ashes. There's no comparison. You have to go back to the end of World War II to find a time when our military was stronger relative to the rest of the world than it is today. And yet Donald Trump is campaigning, attacking our military, saying he would execute the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and saying he would fire all generals if they weren't political loyalists.
Yeah, this campaign has to be a campaign of contrast. And maybe the biggest contrast is the way these two men present themselves as leaders. And let's not kid ourselves. These people that are traveling all over the country, driving hours to watch Donald Trump perform. There are so many. He even referenced one of them at his Bake Fest over the weekend, his shark speech, that go to multiple of these rallies. They come for one thing. They want to see him give the finger to America, the middle finger. They want to see him attack anything that is an institution in this country, our military, our elected officials, our rule of law, our judges, our law enforcement personnel, anything, the Constitution. It's all about grievance. It's all about negativity. It's all about attacking America and how we stink and how America sucks. And isn't it great the way he says it? And doesn't it make you feel that somebody sees your anger? And then contrast that with Joe Biden. I mean, talk about contrast. I mean, there's him giving the weirdest of weird shark speeches, and there's Joe Biden at a sacred place talking about how America stands up to tyranny, how America will always fight for freedom, how America is so proud of those who gave their lives for a greater cause than even our own country, and that is democracy and freedom across the world. It is such a contrast, and I actually believe those undecided voters, that is going to break through, and it won't be a big margin, but it'll be enough to put normalcy and integrity back into the White House as opposed to that chaotic mess on the other side.
Jonathan, this always has been at the core of Donald Trump's argument back to 2015 and 2016 and now again this time around, that the country lies in ruins and he alone can fix it. He can ride in and save the country. The problem with his argument right now is data, statistics, the way people look around and feel about the country. Inflation is too high. We all see that. We all know that. But if you look at that BAFO jobs number again on Friday, unemployment at 50-year lows, all the economic data we talk about. And by the way, as he talks about crime in the streets, a new FBI crime report came out just yesterday. Murder decreased in the first quarter by 26%, rape down 25%, robbery down 18%. and on and on and on. Property crime down as well. So the economy, save for inflation, is good, and crime is down. This is the opposite of what Donald Trump is saying on the stage.
Yeah, crime is down. Another statistic that goes against what Trump says night after night at these rallies, even crossings at the southern border. That have really gone down, particularly in the last week or two since President Biden put his new asylum ban into place. So what Trump is seeing simply doesn't match up with what reality is for most people. But I think you hit on a key word there, inflation. There's been a lot written about in the last couple of days in the wake of these EU elections, too, where the far right was on the ascendant. A lot of incumbents and their parties took hits. Just how big of a role inflation is globally. Even in the United States, which has a stronger economy than any, of course, in Europe, inflation remains, though it has fallen some, persistently high, and voters just hate inflation, and they blame incumbents when they do. But I think this is another moment, though, despite that leads the Biden camp to have an opportunity to draw those contrasts, where we're seeing more and more them leaning in on this. Like, look, say, Donald Trump, he doesn't even like America. Why does he want to be here? Why does he want to be the president for a country he doesn't even like? He doesn't believe in our military. He doesn't believe in our economy. He doesn't believe in our rights and values. And again, at the Juneteenth concert that I covered last night on the White House lawn, President Biden warned about old ghosts in new clothes, meaning those in the Republican Party now who are trying to take away hard-won rights and freedom, not just from black Americans, but from all. And we hear the rhetoric from Trump that just suggests more darkness ahead.
Donald Trump says he stands side by side with the group that wants to, quote, eradicate abortion entirely. The presumptive Republican presidential nominee addressed members of the Danbury Institute yesterday. The group's website refers to abortion as, quote, the greatest atrocity facing our generation today. They also call it child sacrifice. It also opposes so-called unbiblical ideologies that are attacking America's children, including LGBTQ emphasis and rampant efforts to trans our youngest generation. In virtual remarks, Trump's referred to those beliefs as, quote, our values, and effusively praised the Danbury Institute for its work.
I want to thank each and every one of you for your tremendous devotion to God and to country and your tremendous support of me. Your work is so important, we can't afford to have anyone sit on the sidelines. Now is the time for us to all pull together and to stand up for our values and for our freedoms. I hope we'll be defending them side by side for your next 4 years. These are going to be your years, because you're going to make a comeback like just about no other group. I know what's happening. I know where you're coming from and where you're going. And I'll be with you side by side.
Anyone who still thinks he's not going to go further after what he's done to abortion, just look at that and listen, believe him. Meanwhile, our next guest knows firsthand how scary a pregnancy emergency can be in a state with strict abortion laws, thanks to Donald Trump. Caitlin Joshua, a lifelong resident of Louisiana, found out she was pregnant with her second child shortly after the Supreme Court struck down Roe v. Wade. She miscarried after about 11 weeks, and the pain of that loss was multiplied by what she says was incomplete health care service. She says she visited multiple emergency rooms and was denied treatment because of the state's abortion ban, and was left to handle the painful miscarriage at home, despite severe blood loss. Now, nearly 2 years later, Caitlin is traveling across the country for the Biden campaign to share her story and advocate for reproductive rights. And Caitlin joins us now. First, I'm so sorry for what you had to go through. It was completely unnecessary. And your experience is a near perfect example as to why abortion is health care. We're seeing this over and over again, where women suffer, as you did, rather than to get the health care that they need. I'm curious, where are you traveling around the country to tell your story, and how is it being received?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me this morning. And Amanda Zurawski and I are traveling all over to the battleground states within the U.S. and having an opportunity to speak with so many women who have similar stories, which of course is harrowing and horrifying. And it's just unnecessary that so many women are dealing with abortion ban, the domino effect of abortion bans across this country. And so I always like to say, though, I'm mobilized by those conversations because I know if Donald Trump is reelected to the White House and we don't do everything we can to make sure that women are aware of the domino effect of the overturn of Roe v. Wade and how that's playing a role in maternal health care across this country, then we would be in a lot of trouble. And so Amanda and I are just committed to making sure that we get Joe Biden and Kamala Harris back in office to restore Roe and restore our reproductive freedoms.
And Caitlin, in your specific story, when you went to multiple emergency rooms, there might be those who are determined to be against abortion and not see it as health care. There might be some who say, you know, of course a doctor will treat a miscarriage. She was miscarrying. She can't be telling the truth. She was having a miscarriage. Of course they would take care of that. What did you see in the ER that prevented them? What did they say to you, or what did you hear when they were talking about your case with others in the room that made it very clear that the strict abortion laws are what led to you not getting the health care you need when you were in an emergency situation that requires an emergency room?
Yes, my conversations with multiple providers that I saw, and mind you, this is the summer of 2022. This is right after the overturn of Roe versus Wade. This is right when Louisiana enacted our trigger ban, our trigger laws for the abortion ban. And in that moment, in September of 2022, my husband and I, at this time, were excited. We were wanting to bring home a second baby. My daughter at the time was 3, almost 4, and we kind of thought it was the perfect time to add another baby. And so we're a family that wanted to expand. So I just want to make that very clear that abortion bans directly impact those who do want to have children. And the conversations that I had with my providers in that moment were very cut and dry. We cannot help you in this moment. We are sending you home with thoughts and prayers. While we understand that you're in a lot of pain, you're going to have to fight this at home, and we're not going to be able to administer any type of medication, abortion, or care in this moment. And this was at 11 weeks pregnant. And unfortunately, my husband and I have experienced miscarriages before, and so I was well versed in the treatment, especially this far along, and knew what typically that standard protocol is from a medical provider. And so when you're talking with a provider who will not look you in the eye, who will not refer you out to another provider that can provide the medication that you need in order to pass a pregnancy with dignity, then you're talking about the direct impact of what an abortion ban can do in a state in Louisiana. And again, should a federal abortion ban be enacted all over this country, stories like mine will be coming all over all 50 states.
Claire McCaskill, jump in.
Yeah, first of all, thank you for your advocacy. I certainly, I was with my daughter when she suffered a very similar situation. And I think about what we would have done. We were vacationing at the time. And I think about what we would have done if we would have been in a state like my own state, where she would have encountered the kind of obstacle you encountered. You know, we referenced a group that Trump appeared in front of. And I want to talk about this contrast just for a minute. He appeared in front of a group yesterday that believes there should be no exceptions. That life begins at conception, no exceptions for rape, incest, and believe it or not, this group says there should be no exceptions for the life of the mother. Now, can you talk about that contrast? By the way, the same group also was having a vote to outlaw IVF for all those families out there that are looking to have a baby and need the help of science to conceive. Talk about this contrast, and do you think that independent voters around the country that have not been tuned in understand this chasm of difference between these two men and how they view women's health?
Yes, I do think that independent voters, of course, will play a crucial role in this election and, again, are voting down the ballot on this abortion issue in their states, especially when we're talking about reelecting Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and how they've been champions for reproductive health care, especially in the last 2 years since the overturn of Roe v. Wade. And part of my role and what I'm proud to be able to do as I travel across this country is to give folks that information, help them understand the stark contrast between a Joe Biden, Kamala Harris administration and the potential of Trump returning to that office. It is literally the difference between harmful policies that will kill women. Let's be clear, not potentially kill women, but certainly kill women across this country should Trump be reelected to office, versus Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, who have pledged to restore Roe and restore reproductive freedoms in all 50 states, not just in some states. And when you speak of this group that Trump spoke to yesterday, I find it so alarming that someone who is running for the highest level of office in this country would advocate for harmful policies that will kill women, will kill children, and will not put us in a good position when we're talking about terrible maternal health care kill rates since the 60s, right? And so I think it is far too dangerous to even teeter on the line of advocating or going further against IVF or contraception or all the things. Abortion care is health care, and we've seen the science and we've seen the experiences coming out of the southern states. And I don't think that we can turn a blind eye to that and say that this is something that is not essential to the healthcare system.
And you have lived it. Caitlin, Joshua, thank you very much for coming on this morning.
No problem. Thank you.
But, you know, hey, Willie, a couple hours ago, I don't know, this show goes on like weeks at a time. A couple of hours ago, we were our meandering little journey. We were talking
Great
about...
tagline for the show, by the way.
A meandering little journey. I mean, seriously,
It
it's
kind of
straight
feels
up
like what it's
like
been.
the Canterbury Tales.
Only
We just
18
kind
years.
of pick up people and
What year are we on?
keep marching and everything else. But we were talking about disinformation and how crazy it was that Donald Trump goes out, says the craziest things, and the media yawns. And then Joe Biden, while Donald Trump's talking about sharks and electric boats sinking.
Batteries.
And batteries. Joe Biden's at D-Day commemoration, the 80th commemoration, does just a really great job. It makes you proud to be an American, you know, like Reagan and other presidents that have done it in the past. All the Republicans can do is like they actually create disinformation. They actually cut videos that retch from its proper context what Biden did over there. So you've got disinformation on the Republican side, and then when you have Democrats and the mainstream media, I think the Biden campaign's doing a better job now, looking at the craziness of Donald Trump's rallies and what he says there, it's like a collective yawn.
Yeah, and how many times have we heard that? Even from this over the weekend, did you see Biden couldn't even find the chair? And you say, well, no, actually, if you watch the clip, he was standing for a speech, and then he sat in the chair. And they go, they sort of laugh it off as well. Yeah, but still. Yeah. But still. He's old. Here's what they were up to. This is new analysis from the Washington Post showing how a number of Republicans, many of them elected, many in the far-right media as well, using misleading videos, deceptive editing from the events in France last week to commemorate D-Day to go after President Biden. In the first edited video, the RNC, along with its many right-wing influencers amplifying it, posted a 12-second clip showing President Biden standing next to French President Emmanuel Macron, appearing to reach down with his hand, bend his knees, and then freeze. The clip abruptly ends with Biden in an awkward position. Some who posted it suggest the president was sitting in an invisible chair. But the full video shows Biden ultimately sat down after the edited clip ends. He paused briefly while he was crouched, waiting for Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin's name to be called before sitting, out of respect. The wide shot of the stage shows other people also appearing to do the same. In another edited video, President Biden appears to be pulled away by First Lady Jill Biden as one of the D-Day events still is taking place. The camera then pans over to President Macron as he is greeting veterans. Right-wing accounts claim the president was, quote, pulled away from the event. The full video, though, shows the event had concluded with a service member directing the president and First Lady toward the exit. As the Bidens leave, the president salutes, greets, even stops to chat with a number of veterans before finally leaving. A third edited video circulated by right-wing accounts shows a 6-second clip that appears to show President Biden with his eyes closed, a claim he was sleeping. However, the full video reveals the president momentarily closing his eyes during a translated portion of the speech. He opened his eyes shortly after the edited video ends, unlike former President Trump sleeping during his criminal hush money trial. So why do we go through all this, Joe? Why do we show you the Washington Post? That is their work walking through that. Yeah. Because that is what's happening out there. And that is a message and a narrative that's taking hold, many times based on lies and edited video.
And Willie, we talk about it all the time. Our friends with post-grad degrees, our friends who are lawyers, our friends who are very successful will buy this hook, line, and sinker, and then you'll hear it. You'll go, oh, my God, he did this or he did this. They did it after the horrible fires in Hawaii, where Biden, at a very moving memorial service, at one point closes his eyes. Yeah. And they freeze in on that. When you look at it in full context, it's very clear. Like any of us, when we're hearing these horrible stories, we'll close our eyes, we'll reflect, et cetera, et cetera. But again, that's all they have. We have Donald Trump saying crazy things about sharks, World War II, the gathering storm, Barack Obama being president, not being able to complete sentences. I mean, you've said it time and time again, Willie. If people have the stomach to do it, they should watch an entire Trump speech, because the non sequiturs, him meandering out into like the pasture, basically, what's my name? It is. I actually had a friend call me yesterday saying that he and his wife sat down and watched the entire Las Vegas speech for entertainment, because Trump was so crazy during that speech. It was so unpresidential. Crazy is the wrong word. So unpresidential, so out of it, so disconnected from reality. And John Heilemann, you can actually see that in the shots of the people behind him, where they're kind of looking around going, what the hell is going on? Like, what? Sharks? Electric boats? All these people in these Trump sequin hats are just sitting there staring at each other going, I have no idea what's going on. I'd love for you to talk about the speech and the disinformation, but also how, and I think this is so important, how Republicans and these liars, disinformation liars, are actually helping Joe Biden, because they continue to lower expectations like they always have. Then Biden goes to the State of the Union. People are shocked. He's so good.
So cogent.
Same thing's going to happen in the debates. They keep lying. They spread their lies. They lower expectations. And then, boom, Biden shows up and embarrasses Trump.
All right. So, number one, who's not afraid of sharks and electricity in the water? Are you guys not worried about that? Like, that's the kind of thing.
Of course we are.
I think about it all the time. Like, if there was a shark and a drowning person and I don't know what I do. I mean, look. Okay, joking.
Wow.
Secondly, it's joking. Secondly, I mean, Trump. Yes, you guys are. If you try to watch a Trump speech all the way through, you will be stunned. And it's not just that speech. There's not a Trump speech, not one, when he goes on the campaign trail, where you will not find similar kinds of things. Now, that was an extreme example of his bonkersness. I will say, he's a little unhinged in that video for various periods of time. And the non sequiturs really are. You talked about how this show is a little meandering, right? I mean, a lot of the speeches that he does, there is a long walk in the woods several times in each one of those speeches. I think that, Joe, the third thing I'll say about the cheap fakes, just buckle up, everybody, because you have a situation where China, Russia, North Korea, MBS, all regimes that spread a lot of electronic disinformation, they are all on the side of Donald Trump as we head towards November. And the kind of deceptive practices we've seen so far with the video to make Joe Biden look bad, that's going to be nothing compared to what we see when we get to the fall, where there are going to be not just cheap fakes, but deep fakes all over the internet showing all kinds of crazy stuff. So everyone's got to get ready for what the assault on our senses and the disinformation and misinformation we're going to see in the fall. And then finally, Joe, to your last point, I think this goes back to what happened last week. I wrote about it in my column in Puck this week, which is the Wall Street Journal which became part of the disinformation ecosystem here about Joe Biden, I think did do the Biden campaign a favor, and I think the Biden campaign agrees with that, which is not just that they lowered expectations, which, as you said, with the State of the Union, they did. Again, they made it easier for Biden to surmount. They're making it easier. They're going to fall into the same trap again, heading towards the debate in June by talking about how infirm he is, and then if he gives a reasonably good performance in June, he's going to surpass those expectations. But the reaction to the Journal piece was so negative that it kind of served as an object lesson. It kind of reminded people, as a useful corrective. A lot of people in our business, including on this show, but elsewhere, pointed out how terrible the piece was, how insubstantial it was, how badly sourced it was. And they got their rear ends handed to them for writing that piece. And it served as a kind of a gift in a way for the Biden campaign. Kind of just sort of say, like, this is an example, a high profile example, supposedly an explosive piece that turns out to have nothing in it. And I do think, at least in the mainstream press, for anybody who's thinking about approaching Biden's age as an issue, which it's a legitimate issue, but that example of last week reminded people, you got to proceed with greater caution. You got to write about this or talk about it on television in a more careful way, because if you do what the Wall Street Journal did, you are going to very quickly have your reputation ruined. And I don't think the people generally still in the mainstream media, at least, want to have that happen to them.
Jen, there's no doubt there is a double standard when it comes to the coverage of these two men and their ages. Donald Trump, who has a birthday at the end of this week on Friday, is just 3 years younger than President Biden. That's within the margin of error, if you will. But yet there's so much more coverage of Biden than Trump and his age. And a lot of that is driven by that right-wing media ecosystem, some fair, some not, as we just went through some of the fakes they're using to try to drive that narrative. There are a lot of very anxious Democrats out there who are looking to the debate at the end of this month, saying this is the moment where Biden can sort of put some of these stories to rest, or if he fares poorly, some prominent Democrats have said that they still think that'd be the moment that he would drop out, that they would replace him at the top of the ticket. I think we recognize that that's not going to happen, but that speaks to the level of paranoia among some Democrats. But Jen, don't you also think this debate looming in a few weeks is also a huge test for Donald Trump, where both men will be under the national spotlight and both men will be under a lot of pressure to not just stay upright, but to appear coherent and in charge?
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, there's a lot I have to say about Biden, about the age issue, how it's covered, the trip last week. I mean, Jonathan, what amazes me is any president who can stay awake in the sun in Europe after flying all night. I mean, and rushing to get to the event, and then you sit down. It is so. Those presidential trips are brutal, and when you're flying overseas, they are so hard. And he performed so well. And I had a staff, he would never dare to sit down because you're going to fall asleep. So he did and it was such a remarkable display, a reminder of the role that America plays in the world. Imagine if Donald Trump and not FDR had been president at the time, what kind of the stake, that just sort of raised the stakes to put it right in the context of the race overall. But on the age, Trump's birthday is Friday. I think a great organizing opportunity for the Biden campaign would be to tell their supporters to have house parties on Friday to watch a Trump speech in full, right? Gather all their friends together. The friends that Joe and Willie were talking about with postgraduate degrees who make jokes about Biden's age, but otherwise might vote for him, to see what a Donald Trump speech is really like.
All right, and you've got a new piece in the Brennan Center for Justice entitled Lessons from Trump's Manhattan Conviction for Special Counsel Jack Smith. And you write in part, quote, one of the most dangerous tactics Trump has used to convince the public that our norms and expectations about democratic processes, like the criminal justice system, no longer apply. We spend more time contemplating how Trump might derail the system than we do assessing how it should work and what we are entitled to expect from it. That's perhaps the most important lesson Jack Smith can learn from the Manhattan District Attorney's successful prosecution. Bragg treated his case like any other in that sense, ushering it from indictment through pretrial motions and onto a trial where it would be up to a jury to decide on the defendant's guilt. Justice doesn't require a guilty verdict, but it does require a fair process that allows the prosecution to proceed against defendant Trump just like it would against any other defendant. And Joyce, where has Jack Smith gone in, afoul in this, or what is it that he can glean moving forward?
Right. So in this piece, I try to emphasize that Jack Smith, who has been dealt in some ways a bad hand with some of the decisions that we've seen Judge Cannon make, the delay in the Supreme Court, I think has performed really admirably. And the problem that we face as a society is that there's this real malaise, this sense that Donald Trump and Donald Trump alone isn't subject to the dictates of the criminal justice system. So this is an institutionalist point. I know it's become a little bit of a dirty word, institutionalist, but I believe we need strong courts, and that it goes without saying that no defendant is above the law. But somehow Donald Trump has perpetuated this myth that he alone is above the law. And that's an important point for Jack Smith to take on, not in public, not in press conferences, but in the way he and his team conduct themselves in court and in their pleadings.